You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
All writers are prone to becoming so attached to our characters and stories that we struggle to see why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing to full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, shaping stories into masterpieces that can stand the test of time. Editing services are provided for all genres and all age categories. Services range from critiques of the short story through to the line edits of the full-length novel and copy editing for those preparing for publication. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites, as well as help with those book blurbs and promotional material. We won't abandon you to the masses. We want to celebrate with you in your successes. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services and prices, visit us at blackwolfeditorial.com.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control over your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problems now by calling the experts at Tax Mediation Services and take advantage of the Fresh Start program and new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. Tax Mediation Services is accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Call now for a free case review and a price protection guaranteed quote.
Call Tax Mediation Services now at 800-610-9050. That's 800-610-9050. 800-610-9050.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it, there to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 1-800-516-7602 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 1-800-516-7602 to take your call right now. Call 1-800-516-7602. That's 1-800-516-7602. Again, 1-800-516-7602.
Get ready to fight from within. You're about to go behind enemy lines.
Roger, 3-2. Goliath copies all. Go ahead. Target is surrounded by multiple firms entering what appears to be a residential area. Requesting permission to engage.
From the People's Republic of New York City, you're now going behind enemy lines with Gene Baradelli and Russ Gallo.
And you're now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, America? Gene Baradelli here with you. Our very first show of 2017. Glad you can join us, whether you're listening to us on www.BehindEnemyLinesRadio.us, through Spreaker, through any one of our rebroadcast outlets on AM and FM radio. We're so glad that you're with us. Or whether you downloaded us and put us into your device and listen to us on podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We got a great show for our first show of the year. First 2 weeks of the year didn't go so smoothly here behind Enemy Lines. Those of you who've been listening to the show long enough know that I pride myself on trying to get as many shows in as possible. But sometimes circumstances beyond my control come into play. If you've been listening to the show, you know that I recently moved out of the People's Republic of New York City and have moved into the country that is Long Island. It really does feel like its own country, folks. And by the way, haven't seen this many trees before in a very long time. So I'm enjoying my stay here in Long Island now. But certain things have not been going so well. First of all, the internet here, for broadcasting the show live, horrible. Absolutely horrible. So we're working on that issue. That's why we're doing many shows on tape now and then putting them up so you can hear them whenever you want to. The other thing is, we need to have a moment of silence for my former computer that conked down on me finally after years of faithful service. Had to get a new one now. It's got the new hotness going right now. And hope you are... Well, I'm enjoying it so far. It's a kick-butt laptop. I really think it's pretty cool. But anyway, enough about my personal nonsense. Got a great show. And that includes a visit from a good friend, former NRA President David Keene, author and opinions editor for the Washington Times, talking about how in the last gasp of the Obama administration, how they are trying to still infringe upon your Second Amendment rights. And you know what? We're going to have a discussion not only of the last gasp, but also now the dawning of a new era. The Trump administration takes office this week. How exciting is that for many people? I know I'm excited to see what happens. At the very least, it's going to be entertaining. I mean, has it not been entertaining? Are you not entertained? Have you not been entertained lately? I mean, everything that's been going on in politics has been a veritable explosion of political entertainment, politainment, as we sometimes call it here on the show. And the latest bit of politainment has been this outcry over Donald Trump and his taking office, and how it's now over 50 Democratic lawmakers that are going to be boycotting his inauguration, with the list growing, by leaps and bounds, almost minute by minute as we approach the inauguration. Obviously, this all started with Congressman John Lewis, who drew the ire of Donald Trump last week when he told NBC News that he did not plan to attend Trump's inauguration, and that he did not consider Trump to be a quote-unquote legitimate president. Now, let's talk about this word legitimate, because this is another one of those made-up, touchy-feely, tissue paper-feeling words that comes from the left. The same people that were decrying Donald Trump, saying that he would not contest, or that he would possibly contest election results in a debate with Hillary Clinton. These same people have now gone over the top. They've jumped the shark when it comes to this idea of legitimate president. Oh boy, oh boy. Let's talk about the word legitimate for a second. Is he not legitimate in the fact that he won so many states that he ended up earning over 300 electoral votes? Does that not mean legitimacy? Well, Russia and Putin, they did this, that, and the other about, hacking into email supposedly, which, by the way, we'll talk about this in a second, but hacking into emails and exposing all these things, you know what? If there's nothing to expose Democrats, like passing along debate questions, like setting up a system where superdelegates rule over the people and screw over a progressive-leaning senator that was not your handpicked choice, if this is that all legitimate? First of all the shenanigans you pulled, you're talking about building, Donald Trump about building a wall, yet you put up 2 fences and a fence around the podium at the DNC. Having debate questions coming in from an operative who was working in a news agency and passing it along to the Clinton campaign. I'm sorry, you're the last people on the planet to talk about legitimacy. A legitimate president is a president that wins. It's very simple. If a candidate wins the election under the rules and guidelines set forth in our Constitution and all our laws and regulations, that person is therefore legitimate. He does not become illegitimate because you disagree with him. He does not become illegitimate because you think he's unqualified. He does not become illegitimate because he's Donald Trump and he's bombastic and he goes on Twitter and he does all these things that you don't like and he puts, all these fires into the political mix and he communicates directly to the people because that's the way he feels best to handle it. Lewis planning to not attend the inauguration, and the people who filed behind him to say, yes, I'm not attending either. Let's talk about the reason why they're doing it. It's not about legitimacy of the president. It's about scoring points with their people. This is the same problem Democrats have all the time. They are playing to their crowd. They do not realize that Donald Trump has brought in more of a crowd, that he now has a bigger crowd than the Democrat crowd. And he's done that because he's Donald Trump. Right now, those populists are with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump has that Republican label, and he may or may not have conservative leanings, but that's the side that has the bigger group right now. And that's the side that's ruling, and that's the side that came out to vote, and that's why Donald Trump is legitimate, because he took people who were politically disenfranchised by those same Democrats who are now hiding in a corner and stamping their feet and holding their breath, and all the people who claim that he's not legitimate, all of that, they are failing to recognize this new group of people, this new American political class that has developed because Donald Trump has spoken to them, has reached out to them, has brought them into the fold, and they have responded by voting. Now, again, John Lewis, in his righteous indignation, he has his reasons, and, I take nothing away from his history as a civil rights leader. People have called him an icon, and rightfully so. But in this particular case, I think we have to disagree with John Lewis. And here's why we have to disagree. When Donald Trump won the election, and when Hillary Clinton conceded, and in the weeks after that, there was a talking about a healing, a coming together as Americans to support Donald Trump. Because whether you voted for him or not, he's the guy now. He's the one on top. He's the head cheese. He's the man in charge. And where he plots the courses, that's the way America's going. So, to root against him is to now root against America. But these elected officials, these Democratic lawmakers, who seem to be, like I said, throwing a hissy fit, they're doing it for their own benefit, really, and they're doing it because there's no consequence to them. Not going to the inauguration is not something that's going to be politically punished. It's not something where you were meant to attend, you had to attend, you were made to attend, but then you didn't. It's not something that the Democratic leadership is going to enforce against these people. And that's the problem here. There should be a leadership by example within the Democratic Party. But there isn't. And in fact, the leadership of the Democratic Party, or at least one candidate who wants to be the leadership of the Democratic Party, is going around and following suit with John Lewis, and following suit with this line of illegitimacy, going so far to call it a quote-unquote alleged election. Yes, you heard me right, alleged election. Like that first Tuesday in November didn't even happen. It's not really real. The Russians made it all bad. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Here is a clip from Fox and Friends when DNC chair candidate Jammu Green, who was a Fox News contributor, came on the show to discuss what Congressman Lewis did, and hear her response to this. It'll be really interesting to hear the lunacy coming out of Jimmu Green.
So what do you make of remarks from John Lewis, obviously a civil rights icon, but now claiming that Donald Trump is not legitimate? What say you?
He's truth-telling. I don't think this is about just Democrats. This is Americans. Anyone with a smidgen of common sense can remember Donald Trump looking in the camera, encouraging Russia to hack into our electoral process, cheerleading them on, and the idea that whatever information these members of Congress are getting out of this classified briefing had them storm out of that room makes it very clear that the decisions that the FBI made that were unprecedented to get involved in the election against Hillary Clinton, pick a winner, pick a loser, when they had so much information that was so damaging. What have we been talking about since this man was allegedly elected?
Allegedly elected?
I mean, now coming out of Russia.
You would acknowledge that he achieved the necessary electoral votes and is a legitimately elected president of the United States, would you not?
Well, I haven't seen the classified briefing that the members of Congress did. I imagine that I would have run out myself.
So as DNC,
well,
if you win
I don't
the DNC
think it's clear to
chairmanship,
people now.
would you not work with him as a legitimate president?
Look, as the Democratic Party's job right now is to work with the majority of the American people who have given us a mandate to build a resistance against a kleptocracy that Donald Trump is trying to put into place. And that's our job. That's our responsibility right now, to build an opposition party to give the majority of the American people a voice.
You know, I absolutely love this from Jimmu Green. She went head-to-head with Tucker Carlson on his new show on Fox News later in the day. But I absolutely love this. Keep this up, Democrats. Keep this up, because you are going to do nothing but continue to help the Trump administration. This is absolutely wonderful. You're still tone deaf. You still don't understand what happened in this past election. Democrats have a mandate? A mandate to obstruct the Trump administration. These are the same Democrats who called Republicans racist for being the quote-unquote party of no and intentionally obstructing Barack Obama's administration and mandate. This is the absolute flip of the coin from what happened in 2007, 2008. 2009. Absolutely the flip of the coin. It is so amusing to see that the Democrats are imploding from within. That these Democrats keep thinking that they own the political field. That by staying in there and by obstructing the president-elect, who, by the way, hasn't had the power to do anything yet, but by obstructing this man and not going to the inauguration, is making it so that you are being a leader of the people. Are you kidding me? It's just funny to see. And by the way, this goes against the leadership of the party, which will be attending the inauguration. I mean, Hillary Clinton and other dignitaries, obviously, President Clinton and Nancy Pelosi and others will be attending. And to go against the wing of the party that actually did the losing of the election shows that there's a shift in the wrong direction for the Democratic Party from where they were. You know what? Representative Scott Peters, another Democrat, said he will be attending the inauguration because he greatly respects the office of the presidency, even if I don't respect the man who will now inhabit it. That we should be hearing more of. Listen, I may not have had respect for the policies and the direction that Barack Obama took with this nation, but you respect the office of the presidency. You don't just sit in a corner and stamp your feet. You obstruct and you push forth your agenda, but you don't throw hissy fits. You don't call him illegitimate. No one contested the legitimacy of Barack Obama's election. Well, of course, the response would be, well, there were no allegations that he hacked the election or that there was any outside influence or anything like that. But at the end of the day, a vote's a vote. The votes get counted. The states count their own votes. The states put their electoral votes towards the winner. That's how it works. If you want to complain that your dirty tricks, your dirty laundry was exposed to the world, and have us focus on the dirty laundry, and have us focus not on the dirty laundry, but to focus on the wrongdoers who went into your system and found your dirty laundry. How about taking some responsibility? All you're doing now, and again, I alluded to this earlier, all you're doing now is you're setting a very low bar for the Trump administration to now get past and get over. You have put him in such a position where even just swearing himself in, you have to obstruct. You're going to create sympathy for the Trump administration not be able to get things done, but then when they get things done, because they're going to have a majority in both the House and the Senate, when they get things done, the perception will be that the country is moving forward despite your opposition. The next 2 years are going to be Republican years. It's going to be their opportunity to take government in the direction they want to take it in. We see the battle lines being drawn right now with the repeal and replacement of Obamacare. There's going to be many more things coming down the pipe in the next 2 years. It's going to be interesting to see. But you know what? Maybe what they're doing is they're just still licking their wounds months after an election has happened. So let's give a little message to whatever Democrats may be listening to this show. Granted, not many Democrats listen to this show, but maybe they'll stumble upon it and they'll hear this. You lost. Get over it. What, do you think it was going to be something more profound? That's all it comes down to. You can talk about how the game was played and who had... You can talk about how the game was played and who had more influence in doing whatever. But at the end of the day, the die was cast when the American voter went and they marked their vote down. However they do it in whatever state they did it in. You lost. Don't like it? Get better. Get more people to show up to the polls. Maybe not do so many dirty tricks against your own people and disenfranchise voters, especially young voters who supported Bernie Sanders. Maybe not have the press in your pocket so much that they have now become a lapdog to you and the American public starts mistrusting them to the point where maybe legitimate news got lost in the shuffle. You have no one to blame but yourself for these things, Democrats. You lost. Don't like it? Get better. This is the same advice I gave to Republicans back in 2008 and 2012. You don't like the outcome? You don't like the way things went? Regroup, replace, reinvigorate, and let your principles be your guide. Now, say what you want about the Republican Party and whether or not Trump's a real conservative or whether we are still a conservative party or whether the Republican Party has been co-opted by a populist movement. All legitimate arguments to have. But say this, the Republican Party ran a primary system that had the most participation in its history. They had more candidates in its history. They had more ideas exchanged publicly in its history. They had a convention that was done by the rules set forth by the party that everyone played by. They didn't have superdelegates who were upper echelon party members and donors who were in there to put the thumb on the scale in favor of one candidate or another. Do you think the Republican Party got the candidate they had wished for when they had their convention? Of course not. But the system did its job. The Republican voters spoke. The candidate, Trump, did his job. President-elect Trump did his job by having people brought into the party that he knew would support him. It was a populist movement. In essence, an election is a popularity contest, folks. Whoever gets the most people to vote for them wins. Nobody asks, oh, well, what do you really believe on this issue, or that issue, or the other issue when you go into a poll? In fact, you could be the dumbest person on the issues in the world. As long as you have a preference for who you're voting for, and you're an American citizen, you cast that ballot. If you don't like the results, get better. Bring your own people in, Democrats. You had a candidate, Bernie Sanders, who's lighting your party on fire, who was getting tens of thousands of people at rallies. You had energy. You had an infusion of new ideas. Ideas I could not stand, but new ideas nonetheless. New concepts that could have really turned out people to vote. Didn't happen though, did it? What you did was you put your thumb on the scale and you anointed a candidate, a very flawed candidate, by the way, who was riddled by scandal, who was deemed untrustworthy by the voters, and it turns out the voters were right, especially according to the emails that were leaked by whatever source you want them to be. And we'll go into what source and who did what in the end of the show. Very interesting comments from at least one cybersecurity legend, we'll call him, about what he thinks actually happened with this hacking of the election. But we'll get to that after the break, and actually when we come back from that break, we're going to have our good friend David Keene talking about one of the last gasps of the Obama administration to try to take away your Second Amendment rights. The end round around the Constitution perpetrated by Secretary Clinton, Secretary Kerry, and Barack Obama, and what can be done by the Trump administration to protect your Second Amendment rights. Gene Baradelli, Behind Enemy Lines. We'll be back right after these brief words. If you're a long-time listener of the show, or maybe this is your first time listening, you can probably tell that me and the gang here, we like to have our share of fun, whether it's on or off the air. We talk about 2-drink minimum radio and no medication Wednesdays or whatever day it may be. That's why when we found the people at Less Government, More Fun, we knew it was a match made in heaven with this show. Folks, we live in a time where government is out of hand. Our founding fathers did not intend government to be all-consuming in all parts of our lives. That's why we are telling you to go to lessgovmorefun.com, check out the website, check out the swag. What the people want is less government, more fun. Pass it on, make it happen.
Who might you save?
Your mother, your father, your husband, uncle, aunt, son.
Learn FAST, F-A-S-T, the sudden signs of a stroke, and you could save.
Your friend, teacher, boss.
F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. F-A-S-T. That's F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. The sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in the recovery of
your neighbor, the waiter, grandmother, grandfather.
So learn FAST, the sudden signs of a stroke, then pass it on, because you never know who might save you.
Your wife, your colleague.
Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
Behind Enemy Lines Radio is all about being right. No, seriously, it is. If you ever listen to Russ Gallo or me go back and forth on some issue, we always want to make sure that we remember who said what and when we said it. That's why we go to GoOnRecord.com. It's a brand new social media website. Challenge people on what they believe, whether it's in politics, sports, entertainment, finance, whatever. There's a category for you at GoOnRecord.com. Check it out right now. Tell us, what do you stand for? It's time for you to go on record.
Behind Enemy Lines. Back on the air.
Gene Baradelli, back behind Enemy Lines, joining me on the phone right now. It's a pleasure to welcome back to the show the opinion editor of the Washington Times and author of Shall Not Be Infringed, The New Threats to Your Second Amendment, Mr. David Keene. Sir, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Always great to talk to you, and the reason why that is because we always talk about my favorite issue, very close to my heart and close to the show, the Second Amendment, and specifically this time around, we're talking about kind of a parting shot that President Obama is making as he's as he leaves office, and that is the submission of a treaty from the UN that the U.S. has signed on to that you're going to talk to us about. So why don't you explain what the treaty is and how it came to be?
Well, the United Nations for about 10 or 15 years has been working on something called the Arms Trade Treaty. I was the public delegate to the negotiations during the Bush administration, and we stopped anything then because when George W. Bush came into office, he sent John Bolton up to the UN before he was the ambassador to lay down a red line. He said that we as a country would not be part of any international treaty that in any way infringed on the Second Amendment rights of the American people. When Barack Obama was elected, he sent his new Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, up to the UN to tell him that that red line no longer applied and that we wanted a treaty. He signed, or had John Kerry sign the treaty right after the 2012 election when he was reelected, and then held it at the White House because the Senate had informed him that there was no way they were going to ratify it. Then just before Christmas, he decided as one of his parting shots to send it to the Senate and ask for ratification. It's not going to be ratified, but that doesn't mean it isn't a danger to the American people's Second Amendment rights. And I can explain why that is, but it was part of the Obama administration's attempt to go around the Second Amendment, in essence, and get an international agreement that might require the Congress and the President to take action against American gun owners.
Now, as an attorney, David, I like to look at the history of negotiation of such treaties, or the legislative history of bills that pass through our legislatures at various levels. And in this particular case, I noticed that there was at one point language regarding national constitutional protection, which I guess didn't make it into the final language. Would that have protected Second Amendment rights for American citizens?
Yeah, the actual language that was in at one point and that the Bush administration was insisting upon, and so was the NRA, was that it would exclude privately owned, civilian-owned firearms in countries that have protection for such arms. That was specifically taken out of the draft of the treaty once the Obama administration came in. There's still some meaningless language in sort of the introductory part of the treaty that has nothing to do with anything. But in fact, the operative parts of the treaty, as they're being fleshed out now, interestingly sort of mirror the kinds of demands that Barack Obama was trying to get through the Congress and failed to get through. Restrictions on so-called assault weapons, semi-automatic rifles, restrictions on pistols, a national registration system, all kinds of things like that the anti-gun movement has not been able to get domestically, but are hoping that somehow they can get through an international treaty. Now, they could do that if people were not vigilant here. But if a future administration, even without a signed treaty, tries to do some of these things under the treaty, as Barack Obama and Bill Clinton previously did under, you remember, the climate change treaty at Kyoto, which they never sent to the Senate, but they nevertheless used it to justify certain actions. So Congress has the power to stop that, but you have to keep an eye on it all the time. More importantly, maybe, is the fact that under international law, even if a treaty is not ratified, a country that signs it is supposedly required not to act contrary to its interests. And the operative problem here is that the only country in the world that actually recognizes the right of self-defense, which is what the Second Amendment is the United States. Most countries do not recognize either the right to possess a firearm to protect oneself or one's family, or that right in itself. So, and the UN, in fact, specifically rejects individual and family self-defense as a rationale for any kind of action. So, the problem is that part of the treaty, even if we don't sign it, requires that nations not ship sporting arms, any kind of arms, to a country that's a human rights abuser. The UN Human Rights Council, at the behest of China, is taking the position that a country which allows the private ownership of firearms is definitionally a human rights abuser. So there are all kinds of things that can happen as a result of that. They could, it's unlikely in the short term, but they could say to countries that produce a lot of our sporting arms, Turkey produces arms for Benelli and for Beretta, Italy, of course, produces arms, Japan and the others, all are signatories to the treaty, and they could say, you cannot, under this treaty, ship any arms to the United States for use in that country. And these are the kinds of things that I don't think the American people are very familiar with, because this treaty sort of went under the radar in the sense that the public and the press doesn't pay a heck of a lot of attention to what goes on at the UN, sometimes for good reason.
Right. Now, the first thing that entered into my mind as we started talking about this is, how is this not a violation of an oath of office to support and defend the Constitution? How is agreeing to this not a violation?
I would argue that it is, but so are a lot of the other things that the last president did.
Very true. It seems like words don't have meaning anymore.
The real question is, what do you do about it? And so there are some things that can be done and some things that can't be done. The new president and the Congress have two choices. Once a treaty is sent up to the Senate, it has essentially perpetual life. The sort of poster child for that, if you recall, what they call the law of the Sea Treaty, which was negotiated in the 1960s by Elliot Richardson, is still up there, and every once in a while they keep trying to bring it up for a vote. So if you've got a treaty that's been sent to the Senate, and all of a sudden you get a Senate that's friendly to the goals of the treaty, it could be brought up and ratified. What the Senate could do, and it now has two choices, and they're not going to vote on it anytime soon. They could, with a solid majority, bring it up and put a spear in its heart. That would kill it. The other thing that could happen is that the President of the United States can withdraw the nation's signature from the treaty. Remember, we did that on the ABM treaty some years ago. So that's another option that we have. But even without that, even without us being a part of it, the treaty can affect the way other nations view and deal with the United States in terms of shipping and sale and use of sporting arms.
Now, David, this is one example. Your book's almost prophetic in this sense, because in your book, Shall Not Be Infringed, the New Threats to Your Second Amendment, you discuss how gun control advocates would be using the international community to create this end round of constitutional rights. Is this a tactic that we will be seeing more of in the future?
Yeah, one of the things that has to happen, and this goes to the treaty and it goes to all else that's being done, is that the Supreme Court there have to be two appointments to the Supreme Court. We have the Scalia vacancy, as you know, and President Trump has promised that he will nominate a good judge in the mold of Antonin Scalia to that seat. That puts us where we were when Scalia was on the court, or a little behind that, because good as the next justice might be, he's not going to be Antonin Scalia, who was was one of the giants of Supreme Court jurisprudence of the last century. But it does prevent backsliding on decisions that have already been made. The problem involves decisions that haven't been made, because under the Second Amendment or under any of the amendments guaranteeing fundamental rights, the courts can, in fact, legitimize what they call reasonable restrictions on those rights. The sort of poster child example is the First Amendment, where they say you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Well, there are hundreds of different restrictions that are deemed reasonable that have been imposed on First Amendment rights through 100 cases that have gone to the Supreme Court. In the case of the Second Amendment, we haven't had those cases. So the influence of international law, the influence of progressive judicial thinking on the court has an impact on what kinds of decisions come out. Let me give you an example. One of the decisions that the court's going to have to deal with relatively soon is that there's a conflict in the jurisdictions, in the circuits, over whether or not it is reasonable under the Second Amendment to ban the AR-15, the so-called assault weapon. One of the circuits has said that is unreasonable, it's unconstitutional. The right to own and use an AR-15 is guaranteed by the Constitution as interpreted by the Heller decision. Another court has said, well, not really. We find it reasonable to ban that weapon. The same kind of discussion is going on in different courts at lower levels about concealed carry laws. Ultimately, dozens of cases will be pushed upward, and some of them will have to be accepted by the Supreme Court. and dozens of decisions will, over the course of the next few years, define what government can and cannot do in terms of infringing on the right to self-defense and the right to keep and bear arms. So the court needs to be made secure because it's not one decision, it's not one judge. And remember, the Heller decision, which guaranteed or interpreted the Second Amendment as the founders wanted it, was a 5-4 decision. So even with the replacement of one justice, it's still 5-4 on that court, and it's not going to be safe until it's 6-3.
Sounds like a volatile couple of years to come in the battle for so-called gun control. David, how do you see the lay of the land in the next couple of years? Do you see it depending upon the president?
Yeah, I can say two things. One, the lay of the land is a heck of a lot better than it looked like it might be this summer. Because gun owners, believers in the Second Amendment, believers in a lot of our traditional freedom, dodged a real bullet in November. If Mrs. Clinton had been elected, the Supreme Court would in essence have been gone. The Bill of Rights would have been rewritten in essence by the Supreme Court, and we'd lose a lot of the traditional freedoms that motivated voters to go out and make sure she wasn't elected. So we dodged a bullet. But the opposition, as you know, in confronting these issues, the opposition to firearms ownership, the opposition to the Second Amendment, is almost driven by a religious fervor, by people who actually believe that if they could snap their fingers and abolish firearms, that we would live in a peaceful utopia. There'd no longer be robberies, there'd no longer be muggings, everybody would get along with everybody. John Bolton, in the foreword to our book, said that it reminded him of the 60s and 70s with the unilateral disarmament crowd that believed that if we just gave up all of our weapons, the world would be peaceful. Well, it isn't. And neither is the country, because there are bad people, and there are oftentimes a need to defend oneself. And in addition to that, in this country, we have a tradition of being able to use firearms for any legal purpose, including hunting and the like. But it's self-defense, the right to protect one's liberty and one's safety and one's family and community that lie at the base of the Second Amendment of the Constitution.
And I think at this moment it's probably best for me to not add anything, because I couldn't say any better than David Keene, the opinion editor of the Washington Times and author of Shall Not Be Infringed, The New Threats to Your Second Amendment. Pick it up where fine art books are sold. David, thank you so much for coming on the show, and look forward to talking to you after the inauguration and further in 2017.
My pleasure. I'm always happy to come on.
The show will be right back. But first, a word from Al Sharpton.
Good evening, Rev. Thanks
Good evening,
to
Rev.
you, Ed. Is this Groundhog Day 2? We are watching that was Attorney General Eric Holder, ABDs, about some Republicans at home are already beating the drums of war. Today, the Pentagon refuted that claim. And he said the American people do not want him to, quote, dwindling, they do not want him dwindling his thumbs. You can get a gig as a contortionist. Intravenous fluids and pills coated with gelatin. We don't leave our women or men in uniform behind. It's a monument to the hubris of Dick Cheney, Representative Raul Labrador. Years of abuse. I personally apologize to Mr. Peebles. Just ask to soon-to-be former Congressman. Democrats are outright jitty. CIA's counterterrorism center. Veteran Affairs Secretary Shinseki. Why do I always mess up his name? Shinseki. I love my critics. I have fun with that.
Politics Nation with the Reverend Al Sharpton starts right now. Good evening, Rev.
Good evening, Dr. Dyson.
But wait, there's more.
And we will much about that be committed. So there's no real conflict. Michael Druniak, including Lincoln himself, Daniel Day-Lewis. Behind Monica Lewinsky, the one and only Trey Songz is here. But Allison Lundergan Grimes, Gina De Jesus. When Gina De Jesus, Tea Party challenger Matt Bivens. People don't want to have their Social Security overall. The Republican savior, Mark Rubio's big night in evolution and Galileo. I mean, this whole thing of Galileo. America's changed. Unless IT and Skillets, President Putin doing something similar back in, it won't change this fundamental fact about the GOP. Just how absurd these attacks is. Nearly 6 months after the dangerous traffic jam, the Thai military says, my friend for many years, Ilyana Van Zandt. There's nothing there.
And they gave this guy a TV show? Let's get back to our show.
Hey, thanks for listening to Behind Enemy Lines Radio. I'm Gene. Russ Gallo, my partner in crime and co-host, couldn't make it this week, but we both want to thank you for listening to our show. Check us out at www.behindenemylinesradio.us. Check us out on the Facebooks and the Twitters at BEL_radio. And if you missed any part of the show that we usually do live 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Spreaker, you can catch us at any one of our rebroadcast outlets, including WNJC 107.5 FM in beautiful Jasper, Florida, WDDQ 92.1 FM in Adel, Georgia, and our newest outlet on the airwaves, WLBB 1330 AM in Carrollton, Georgia, all part of the Red Nation Rising Radio Network. You can also check us out at KLRN Radio, High Plains Talk Radio, and Sackheads Media, ICRN, the Internet's Conservative Radio Network, which powers Red Nation Rising, and Lanterns Radio. Go check them out at lanterns.buzz. But even if you missed those rebroadcasts, which, by the way, are listed on our website, www.behindenemylinesradio.us, you can check us out on demand on iTunes, Spreaker, TuneIn, Stitcher, Podbay, Player FM. You can discover us on Google Play Music. You can find us on SoundCloud. And, of course, you can always listen to us on the mighty iHeartRadio. As we round out another great show, I want to thank David Keene for coming on the show. As always, check out the Washington Times and all the great news and opinions you can find in that great publication. I want to go back to something we talked about earlier in the show, this idea of the illegitimacy of the Trump presidency, which in part is based upon the idea that the Russians, those dirty Russians, they hacked the election, they influenced the outcome. They did these dirty things and got into Democratic dirty secrets and exposed them. Their dirty deed exposed our dirty deed, and it's all dirty. And it's all based on this idea, propagated by the Obama administration and supposedly backed up by evidence that they found, saying that the Russians hacked the DNC. That they also probably attempted to attack and hack the RNC. And that's the basis for this new mandate. We really won. It wasn't the fact that our candidate stunk. It wasn't the fact that she ran a poor election. It's the Russians. It's always somebody else's fault. And I mentioned during that portion of the show where we discussed this whole conspiracy that a cybersecurity legend disagreed. Now, I did a little digging. I did a lot of digging, and I found, Lord help me, Ed Schultz, and an interview he did on RT. Granted, consider the source is possibly an illegitimate source covering an illegitimate operation, but they had on John McAfee. You may recognize the name from the guy who has the cybersecurity built into your computers when you buy them. And John McAfee looked at the report that was made public, and he had some very strong opinions as to why he didn't believe that Russia hacked the election. Take a listen to this.
I'm going to be very frank with you and the American public. I think that today, the most deceptive propaganda to date was perpetrated on the American public. The data that was presented, the evidence was culled from a thing called the Grizzly Steppe Report, put together jointly by Homeland Security and the FBI. In there are 4 facts which they claim prove that Russia did this hack. It was utter nonsense. The information was, number 1, Russian language was found in the malware. Number 2, a Cyrillic keyboard was used. By the way, the forensic science can now tell what type of keyboard was used to develop a piece of malware. Number 3, the compiler, that is the piece of software that compiles the code so that it can execute, always dates and timestamps. It said that the timestamps were in a time zone for the business hours of Moscow and St. Petersburg and other places in Russia. And then number 4, that the IP address pointed to a Russian address. Now, let me go through this and try to make it very simple for the American people. If the CIA wanted to hack Russia, the things you would not do is you would not include the English language in your software, because that would then exclude everybody except English-speaking nations. You would certainly not use a keyboard that everybody knows that the CIA uses, whatever keyboard they use. You'd have them use a Chinese keyboard or something else. You would certainly remove the date and timestamp from the program so that you couldn't tell what business hours or what zone you were in when it was compiled. And number 4, you would absolutely not have an IP address that points to you. Because, seriously, if Russia declared war on us because we hacked Russia, and the head of the CIA or the intelligence committees came to Congress and they said, well, what happened? Oh, well, you know, we didn't have time to remove the English language. We didn't have time to remove the date stamp. We didn't have time. The guy that couldn't use the Chinese keyboard, so we gave him our regular keyboard. And, you know, it was my wife's birthday, so I could not remove the IP address. Please. Yeah. That person would be scheduled for suicide.
He went on to say that the malware that was used, and listen, I'm a tech dunce, okay? Certain things I know, certain things I don't know. I don't know about malware, and I don't know about cybersecurity. I'm your average Joe when it comes to this. I make sure that my computer gets updated every day and make sure it doesn't, you know, I can still use it. The man who almost basically invented cybersecurity is saying that not only would this not look like a Russian hack, it looks more like some quote-unquote kid in a basement who was using a malware that had been updated and is 1.5 years out of date. Now, listen, like I said, I'm not the biggest tech guru. I am definitely not the most savvy, nerd alert guy. You know, I'm not on the Geek Squad. But I would think that when a cybersecurity founder and basically the man who invented the science, at least to my knowledge anyway, like I said, I'm not up on this tech stuff, but a name that even I know says that this wasn't the Russians and here's the legitimate reasons why, and presents it out the way he did, and says that, I tend to go along with him. It may or may not have been the Russians. It may have been some kid in a basement. But all this is, to me at least, colored bubbles. Because the fact of the matter is, there was dirty laundry to be found. There were secrets that that the Democrats didn't want us to know about. There were secrets there to be found by whoever was lurking in the darkness of cyberspace. Isn't that what we should be focusing on? Shouldn't we be focusing on not... yes, the cyber attack is a problem, and that needs to be dealt with by the Trump administration. But politically speaking, using that as a scapegoat for why you lost? Come on already with this nonsense. Own up to it. It's your loss, Democrats. And my Brooklyn's coming out because you see I'm getting a little upset. Enough already. You lost. If you don't like it, get better. We've been saying that throughout the whole show. And that'll just about do it for this week's show. I want to thank David Keene for coming on the show. David has always been a friend to Behind Enemy Lines Radio, and it's always a pleasure to talk to him no matter what he's doing, whatever the topic is. It's always great to have him on. I want to thank you guys for listening. Check us out, as always, at www.behindenemylines.radio.us. And I especially want to thank our audience, that means you people, for coming to the website all the time, especially last month, for our now record-breaking Buffoon of the Year competition. The results are in. The ballots have been counted. We have confirmed that Russia has not hacked the vote. The winner of the 2016 Buffoon of the Year is Anthony Weiner. Carlos Danger, whatever you want to call him, he won. Finally, it's the third time around for him in our contest. He finally won the vote for his philandering and his, all the yucky, icky stuff that he does. This time, right before the election, we're finding out that there were emails that were missing from Emailgate on his personal computer. And we found this out because he did it again. He was sending out these photos to, this time, an underage girl. Oh, boy. Hell of a way to win, Anthony. Good job. He beat out Donna Brazil, who, as we all know, was part of the hack. And we found out that she was passing along debate questions to the Clinton campaign from her position in CNN. But that's not the issue. The issue is she was hacked, and we shouldn't believe WikiLeaks and all that. You know, that's the real issue. Yeah, right. Whatever. So congratulations, Anthony. Buffoon of the Year comes back next year. It is a staple of the show, and we thank all of our listeners for participating. Over 1,000 people just looked at that on our website, www.behindenemylinesradio.us, and we thank you for checking it out, and we hope you continue to check out our site as much as possible. Time for a very quick final thought. Tonight, my thoughts and prayers are with the family of a friend of mine that I've met as part of doing this show. My friend Richard Fair, who was a budding radio show host, was just about to land a show in Chicago for himself, and unfortunately news came to us this week that Richard had passed away in a fire in his apartment. So our thoughts and prayers are with him and his family and his friends. God bless, sir, and we're going to miss you. We're going to miss you a lot. That'll just about do it for this week's show, folks. From the People's Republic of New York, this is Behind Enemy Lines Radio. It's time to shut this sucker down. We are out of here. Good night, folks.
Our position's been compromised. It's time to roll out. Report for debriefing at www.behindenemylinesradio.us and look for regular communications via Facebook and Twitter at BEL_radio. You are the resistance. Behind Enemy Lines. A Rock Radio production. Copyright 2016. Back in 7 days. Out.